This lesson is the introduction to probability. We're going to discuss what is probability. We're going to talk about events. We're going to talk about favorable outcomes and how probability is going to help us answer some of these questions. So suppose I gave you a true and false test. Now, people like true and false questions because there's a 1 out of 2 chance that they get the right answer. This is what we call probability. Probability is the measure or chance, the likelihood that event will occur. Here's the question. We're going to give Michael. All right, Michael, I want you to answer this true or false question. Now, the event is Michael answering the question. The event is the set of all possible outcomes. So how many possible outcomes are there for Michael? Well, let's talk about it. The possible outcomes are what? Well, obviously, it could be true or it could be false. So how many possible outcomes are there? There are two possible outcomes. Now, what we want to know is, what is the probability that during this event, the answer would be true? So we got P for probability, and my event, right? What I want to know is what's the probability of my answer being true? Well, if it's true or false, out of these two possible choices, there's only what? One true. Out of how many? Out of 2 possible choices. So the probability of the answer being true is 1 out of 2. Let's look at another question. Suppose I had on my desk a bunch of coins. I had 2 quarters, 3 nickels, 2 pennies. Let's make that 4 pennies. And 3 dimes. 3 dimes. Now, I want to know what is the probability that I would choose a nickel from all the coins that's on my desk. Well, the first thing is we got to decide, all right, how many possible outcomes can I have? How many possible, well, let's count. There's what? We have 1 quarter, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. We have 12 possible outcomes. All right, so now I want to know, all right, if I have 12 outcomes, what is the event that I will have a favorable outcome, the result that I want? Well, if we take a look, there's 1 nickel I can choose that will give me the result that I want. Here's another nickel that will give me the result that I want. And one more time, there's a 3rd nickel that will give me the result that I want. So if I want a nickel, I have 3 opportunities to get a nickel. So with that being said, the favorable outcome in this situation, or the chance, is 3. I have 3 chances out of 12 to get this. And once we reduce this fraction, we will understand that our probability is 1 out of 4. And sometimes we write that as a percentage, and that would be 25% chance that I will get a nickel out of this group. All right, suppose that I have a die. For those people that don't know what a die is, that's a dice where it's just one of them. So when you have a die and you roll it, we know that there are how many possible outcomes? Hopefully everybody says 6. We know that there's an opportunity, right, for you to get a 1, a 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Right? Those are the numbers that you can get when you roll a die. Now, we're going to do several problems based off this question right here. All right, what is the probability that I will roll a 3 if I roll a die? Well, once again, how many possible outcomes can I have? I will have 6. And I also know that there's only 1 3, so that gives me a 1 out of 6 chance that I will end up with a 3 if I roll a die. What is the probability that if I roll a die, I would get a 2 or a 4? If I roll a die, what is the probability that I would get a 2 or a 4? All right, let's talk about how many possible events, how many possible outcomes can I have? Well, once again, I could either get a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So that hasn't changed. There are still 6 possible outcomes for me. Now, what is the probability of me getting a 2 or a 4? Well, I see there's a 1 chance for me to get a 2, and here's another chance for me to get a 4. So the probability of me getting a 2 or a 4 if I roll the die is 2 out of 6. And if we reduce that, that is a 1 out of 3 chance. Let's do one more. What is the probability that I will roll an even number? An even number. Well, once again, I could roll a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, so that leaves me with 6 possible outcomes. And for an even number, we know that 2 is even, 4 is even, and 6 is even. So that leaves me with what? A 3 out of 6 chance. And if we reduce that fraction, it is a 1 out of 2 chance. And the last question is, what is the probability if I roll 1 die that I will roll an 8? Well, let's take a look. I know that I can roll a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So that leaves me with 6 possible outcomes. And what is the probability that I roll an 8? Well, if you notice, out of the possible outcomes I have, none of them are an 8. So the probability of me rolling an 8, or the chance of that coming up, is a 0 out of 6. So if I reduce that, there's a 0% chance of that happening.